So straight line equations given the gradient and the coordinate. So the equation of a straight line is y equals mx plus c, where m is the gradient and c is the y-intercept. So the gradient is how steep the slope is. So remember that gradient is positive if it's going up a hill, and it's negative if it's going down a slope. And c is the y-intercept, so that's the point on the y-axis where the straight line crosses it. So if c equals 0, then it's going through the origin at 0, 0. So you can see there, I've got a line here with a negative gradient, and c is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So there are different types of line equations. We've got horizontal lines, and horizontal lines have a gradient of 0, if you remember from Nat 4. We've got vertical lines. They have a gradient of undefined, or sometimes you'll see it written as infinity, or m equals infinity. And then you've got our two sloping lines, and we've got the one that looks like it's going up a hill, and that has m equals positive gradient. And we've got one that looks like a ski slope, and it's got a negative gradient. So how do we write the line equations? Well, for the horizontal line, y equals the number that it crosses the y-axis at. So basically y equals c, where c is our y-intercept, or sometimes in textbooks you'll see it written as y equals b, where b is any point on the line. And you know that these lines are y equals 3 because every single coordinate will have 3 as their second number. So you would have a line going through negative 10, 3, 0, 3, 77, 3, and they would all be on that line y equals 3. If we have an undefined gradient for our vertical line, that means that we don't have the ability to use our gradient equation to work out what the gradient is, because you can't divide by 0, and you can see that there's no shift along the x-axis one way or the other. That's why the line doesn't have anything to do with y, because unless it's x equals 0, which is what the y-axis would be, then a vertical line is never going to touch the y-axis. It's always going to be parallel to the y-axis. And when we come back to do parabolas later, this x equals 2, knowing that every single one of the coordinates is going to be 2 something. So we could have 2, 25, 2, 0 would be crossing the x-axis, and 2, negative 11 would be underneath the x-axis. They're all lying on that vertical line of x equals the number. If we have a positive or a negative gradient line, we have to use our y equals mx plus c, so that we can work out the gradient, and if it's positive, we will know that we've got it right. Now remember, gradient is the vertical over the horizontal. So it's the difference in our y coordinates divided by the difference in our x coordinates, and we'll do more on that later. But today, what we're going to be given is we're going to be given the gradient, and we're going to be asked to work out what the equation of our line is, given a point on that line. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the equation of the straight line with gradient 3 and passing through the point 4, 5. So the first thing we want to do is we want to write down our equation of our straight line. So our equation of a straight line is y equals mx plus c. Now, a bit like in science, we're going to extract the information that we've been given in the question. So you can see we've been told that our gradient is 3. So that means we know that m equals 3. We've also been told that our point on that line is 4, 5. So we know that the x coordinate is 4. So we can substitute in x equals 4. And we know that the y coordinate is 5. So we can substitute in y equals 5. So we're going to substitute that information because what we're trying to do is we're trying to work out what c is. So if we substitute it in, we've got 5 equals 3 multiplied by 4, because remember mx is m times x, and we're going to add on c. So that gives us 5 equals 12 plus c. Now we want to do the opposite of add 12, so we're going to take away the 12 from both sides. And that gives us c equals, and 5 take away 12 gives us negative 7. Now the important thing is it's asked us for the equation of the straight line. So you need to substitute in the gradient and the value for c into your y equals mx plus c for your final answer. So therefore, y is going to equal our gradient, which is 3x, minus our value for c, which is minus 7. So the equation of the straight line is y equals 3x take away 7. So let's have a look at another example. Now, you won't always have a gradient that's a whole number. Sometimes it will be fractional. So in this one, we have a gradient of half. So let's write our equation, y equals mx plus c. This time our gradient is a half. So we can say that m equals a half, or 0.5 if you want to use a decimal. And then we've got an x value of negative 6. And we've got a y value of 3. So now we're going to substitute it in. So we've got 3 equals a half multiplied by negative 6 plus c. So we need to work out what a half of negative 6 is. So that's going to give us negative 3 plus c. Then we need to do the opposite of take away 3, which is add 3 to both sides. So we're going to get c equals 6. And then we have to rewrite our line, y equals the gradient half x plus c, which is plus 6. So here's an example where this time we have a gradient of 0. Now, there are two ways of doing a question like this, because we know that a gradient of 0 means that it is a horizontal line. So remembering that fact, we can go straight to the coordinate and say, okay, if my gradient is 0, so let's write that, my gradient is 0, so my line is horizontal. And if it's going through the point 715, then my gradient, my line is going to be called y equals 15. Because I know that if it's going through 715, that line, if I extend it back to the y-axis, is going to go through 0,15. Now, if you don't remember that fact, for horizontal lines, you can still use your y equals mx plus c. So if we do that over here, if we say y equals mx plus c, we've got m equals 0, we've got x equals 7, and we've got y equals 15. So if we substitute that in, we've got 15 equals 0 multiplied by 7 plus c. And then I'm going to work out that 0 times 7 is 0, and add on the c, gives me c equals 15. And then if I write it as 0, y equals 0x plus 15, I can simplify that to be y equals 15, because I know that 0 times x is just going to give me 0. Now, when you have this example, find the equation of the straight line with undefined gradient and passing through the point 715, you need to remember the fact that undefined gradient means that the line is a vertical. So if we've got undefined gradient, so if we draw ourselves a sketch here, the point 715 is going to be, say, here. Now, in the previous example, we were looking at the horizontal line. This time, we're looking at a vertical line because we've got m equals undefined. So this coordinate here, if this is 715, then this coordinate here has to be 70. And so that means our line is going to be x equals 7.